48 hours. That's how long the ceasefire lasted. Not 48 days, not even 48 weeks of fragile peace. 48 hours. And 36 hours into that window, diplomatic briefings in Washington, Tel Aviv, and European capitals were still describing the ceasefire framework as holding and characterizing back-channel communications with Tehran as constructive. What happened between 11 p.m. on March 14th and 2 a.m. on March 17th became the fastest collapse of a negotiated ceasefire in Middle Eastern conflict history since the 1973 Egyptian-Israeli agreements broke down. But beyond the diplomatic failure, beyond the embarrassment in Geneva and the scramble inside the White House Situation Room, those 48 hours sent a far more consequential message. Iran was not interested in pausing. Iran was interested in escalating on terms nobody in the international community had prepared for. And at 2:47 a.m., on March 17th, when Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval units deployed across 11 strategic choke points in the Strait of Hormuz, the question was no longer whether the ceasefire could be salvaged. The question was how the global economy would function when 21% of the world's oil supply stopped moving. If you're here because you're exhausted by coverage that treats this like political theater instead of the genuine crisis it is, you're in the right place. This is war conflict. We don't do headlines. We do the details that actually matter. Hit subscribe now because what I'm about to walk you through is not being discussed honestly anywhere in mainstream media, and there's a very specific reason why. The offer was transmitted to Tehran through Swiss diplomatic channels at 9 a.m. GMT on March 31st, 2025. The document, 11 pages, outlined what Trump administration officials described as a comprehensive normalization framework designed to end 47 years of U.S.-Iran hostility. Here's what was on the table. Sanctions relief. Phased removal of all U.S. economic sanctions imposed since 2018, including banking, energy, and shipping restrictions, beginning 30 days after agreement signature and completing within 18 months. Nuclear constraints. Iran would agree to cap uranium enrichment at 3.67%, the level specified in the original 2015 JCPOA agreement, allow full IAEA inspections of all declared and suspected nuclear sites, and dismantle centrifuge arrays beyond those needed for peaceful energy production. Regional behavior. Iran would commit to ceasing all military support to Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi forces, and Iraqi militia groups, withdraw Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps personnel from Syria, and end all ballistic missile development programs with ranges exceeding 300 kilometers. In exchange, the United States would normalize diplomatic relations, including reopening embassies. Remove Iran from the state sponsors of terrorism list. Unfreeze approximately $120 billion in Iranian assets currently held in restricted accounts globally, and provide written guarantees that the U.S. would not pursue regime change or support internal opposition movements. On paper, it was the most comprehensive proposal any U.S. administration had offered Iran since 1979. Trump himself, in a Truth Social post on April 1st, described it as the deal of deals, everything Iran says it wants, peace, prosperity, sanctions gone. All they have to do is stop being the world's biggest state sponsor of terror. Simple. Diplomatic sources in Europe, the Gulf states, and within the U.S. State Department characterized the offer as a serious attempt to create an off-ramp from escalating military tensions that had brought the region closer to full-scale war than at any point since 2003. Assessments projected a 40-50% probability Iran would engage with at least portions of the framework as a basis for negotiation. Intelligence reporting suggested moderate voices within Tehran, particularly President Masoud Pezeshkian and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, were advocating for a counter-proposal rather than outright rejection. The betting inside the administration was cautiously hopeful, not that Iran would accept the offer in full, but that it would provide enough of an opening to start a process. By 4 p.m. Tehran time on April 2nd, that hope was gone. The first 36 hours gave administration officials reason to believe engagement was possible. Iranian state media did not immediately denounce the offer. That silence, in diplomatic terms, was notable. Historically, Iranian leadership had rejected U.S. proposals within hours, often before fully reviewing them. The extended silence suggested internal deliberation. At 2 p.m., on April 1st, Swiss intermediaries reported that Iran had formally acknowledged receipt of the proposal and indicated a response would be forthcoming within 48 to 72 hours after appropriate review. That response timeline was interpreted as positive. It suggested Iran was taking the offer seriously enough to analyze it rather than dismissing it reflexively. European diplomats, briefed by U.S. counterparts, began preparing contingency frameworks for multilateral support if Iran engaged. Gulf states were quietly informed to expect potential movement toward de-escalation. At 10 a.m. on April 2nd, inside the White House West Wing, senior advisors used phrases like cautious progress and potentially productive track. Trump himself, in a private call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, reportedly said, "They're actually reading it. That's further than Obama ever got." 18 hours later, that optimism was obliterated. At 4:17 p.m., Tehran time on April 2nd, Iranian state television interrupted regular programming for an unscheduled address by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The speech was broadcast live. It lasted 8 minutes and 22 seconds, and it left absolutely no room for diplomatic interpretation. Khamenei described Trump's offer as the latest chapter in American delusion. The arrogant presumption that the Islamic Republic will surrender its sovereignty, abandon its allies, and dismantle its defense capabilities in exchange for the temporary lifting of illegal sanctions that should never have been imposed. He continued, "The American president believes Iran can be bought. He is mistaken. He believes pressure can break our resolve. He has learned nothing. This offer is rejected, not because its terms are inadequate, but because its premise is insulting. Iran does not negotiate from a position of weakness. Iran does not beg for what is rightfully ours. And Iran will not abandon the resistance, the people of Palestine, the fighters of Lebanon, or the oppressed across the region because a real estate mogul in Washington promises us money that was stolen from us in the first place." The speech included specific rebuttals to each component of Trump's framework on sanctions relief. Sanctions relief is not a concession. It is the correction of economic warfare. It is not something we negotiate for. It is something owed. On nuclear constraints, Iran's nuclear program is peaceful, legal, and non-negotiable. We will not dismantle the capability we built with our own hands because America fears our progress. On regional behavior, our support for resistance movements is not terrorism. It is the defense of the oppressed against Zionist occupation and American imperialism. That support will continue and expand. Khamenei concluded, "Tell Mr. Trump Iran does not fear his threats. We have endured worse. If he believes maximum pressure will work this time when it failed before, he is welcome to try. If he believes military threats will intimidate us, he is welcome to test that theory. Iran is prepared for any scenario. The question is whether America is prepared for the consequences of its arrogance." At 5 p.m., Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanaani issued a formal statement echoing Khamenei's position and adding that Iran considered the diplomatic channel through Switzerland closed unless the United States demonstrated willingness to negotiate on terms of mutual respect and sovereign equality, not as a master dictating to a subordinate. By 6 p.m., European diplomats were reporting to capitals that the framework was dead and no counterproposal was forthcoming. At 11:43 p.m., Washington time, President Trump posted on Truth Social, "Iran just made the biggest mistake of its existence. They had a chance. I gave them everything. They spit in our face. Big price coming, bigger than they can imagine." 16 hours later, the price became clear. At 2:30 p.m. on April 3rd, President Trump convened an emergency National Security Council meeting in the White House Situation Room. Attendees included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Charles Brown, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. The meeting was scheduled for 1 hour. It lasted 3 hours and 47 minutes. What was discussed, according to 4 separate sources with direct knowledge, was not whether to respond militarily to Iran's rejection. That decision had already been made. What was discussed was scale. Trump opened the meeting, according to one attendee, by stating, "We tried it their way. Diplomacy, offers, carrots. They laughed at us. Now we go back to what works. Maximum pressure meets maximum response. And if that doesn't work, there won't be an Iran left to pressure." Secretary of Defense Hegseth presented 3 operational options. Option 1, targeted strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, ballistic missile production sites, and Revolutionary Guard command centers, approximately 150 to 200 targets. Execution timeline, 48 to 72 hours from authorization. Estimated duration, 3 to 5 days of sustained operations. Option 2, comprehensive degradation campaign targeting nuclear sites, military infrastructure, energy facilities including oil refineries and export terminals, transportation networks, and command and control systems. Approximately 800 to 1,200 targets. Execution timeline, 7 to 10 days from authorization. Estimated duration, 2 to 3 weeks of sustained operations. Option 3, strategic dismantlement campaign designed to destroy Iran's capacity to function as a modern state. Every military installation, every government facility, every piece of critical infrastructure including power generation, water treatment, telecommunications, and transportation. Approximately 2,400 targets. Execution timeline 10 to 14 days from authorization. Estimated duration 4 to 6 weeks of sustained operations. CIA Director Ratcliffe provided casualty estimates for each option. Option 1, 500 to 2,000 immediate casualties, primarily Iranian military personnel. Civilian casualties from collateral damage 200 to 800. Option 2, 5,000 to 12,000 immediate casualties. Civilian casualties 3,000 to 15,000 depending on proximity of energy and transportation targets to population centers. Option 3, 50,000 to 150,000 immediate casualties. Long-term civilian casualties from infrastructure collapse, including loss of power, water, and medical services. Potentially 500,000 to 2 million over 6 to 12 months. One participant described the room as silent after Ratcliffe finished the Option 3 briefing. Trump, according to 2 sources, responded, "That's the one that guarantees they never threaten us again, correct?" General Brown reportedly replied, "Mr. President, that option guarantees Iran ceases to function as a regional power for a generation. It also guarantees regional war, massive civilian suffering, oil prices that cripple the global economy, and potentially direct conflict with Russia and China, both of whom have defense commitments to Iran." Trump, "But it ends the problem." Brown, "It ends Iran. It doesn't end the problem. It creates 10 new ones." National Security Advisor Waltz interjected, suggesting Option 2 as a credible middle path that achieves military objectives without the humanitarian catastrophe of Option 3. Trump, according to sources, was unconvinced. "Middle paths are how we got here. Maximum pressure didn't work because we never followed through. They need to know we're serious, all of it, every target. Then we see if they still want to reject deals." No final decision was made during the meeting. Trump reportedly ordered the Pentagon to prepare detailed execution plans for all 3 options, with Option 3 receiving priority development and directed updates within 72 hours. At 6:15 p.m., Trump held an impromptu press availability outside the White House. He was asked by a reporter whether military action against Iran was under consideration. Trump responded, "Iran just rejected the best offer they'll ever get. They think we're bluffing. They think maximum pressure is just sanctions and tough talk. They're about to find out what maximum response looks like. Every target, every facility, everything they've built, gone. And I mean that. If they don't come back to the table immediately and accept our terms, there won't be a table left. There won't be an Iran left." Reporter, "Are you threatening to destroy Iran?" Trump, "I'm promising it. They have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, it's out of my hands. Actually, it's completely in my hands, and I'm ready." What does America do when the diplomatic path collapses and the military options range from bad to catastrophic? This is not a theoretical question. This is the strategic reality facing U.S. policymakers right now. Option 1, the targeted strike package, achieves limited objectives. It damages Iran's nuclear program, but doesn't eliminate it. It degrades missile capabilities, but doesn't neutralize them. And it guarantees Iranian retaliation against U.S. forces in the region, attacks on Gulf state oil infrastructure, closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and activation of proxy forces across Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. The cost: American casualties, regional instability, oil price shocks, and a furious Iranian leadership more committed to confrontation than before. Option 2, the comprehensive campaign, achieves broader military objectives, but at exponentially higher cost. Destroying Iran's energy infrastructure triggers oil prices above $200 per barrel. Destroying transportation networks creates a humanitarian crisis. Destroying government facilities potentially destabilizes the entire country and creates power vacuums that extremist groups will fill. The cost: everything in Option 1 multiplied, plus long-term regional chaos that makes post-2003 Iraq look manageable. Option 3, strategic dismantlement, achieves the stated goal of ensuring Iran never threatens us again. It also achieves mass civilian death, a humanitarian catastrophe that makes Yemen's famine look minor, international condemnation including from U.S. allies, and the strong possibility of direct military confrontation with Russia and China, both of whom have explicitly stated that large-scale attacks on Iranian civilian infrastructure cross red lines. The cost: potentially everything, global economic collapse, regional war, great power confrontation, and a death toll measured in hundreds of thousands to millions. None of these options restore what existed 72 hours ago. when diplomacy still seemed possible. The trap, and this is the part that should terrify everyone, is that Trump has spent 4 years building a political brand on toughness, on promises that he'll do whatever it takes, on the idea that America wins because Trump doesn't back down. He just publicly promised to blow up the whole country if Iran doesn't surrender. If he backs down now, if he doesn't follow through, his entire political identity collapses. His base, the constituency that believes strength means action, will see it as weakness. But if he follows through, if he actually executes option 3, the consequences are genuinely unthinkable. Iran has boxed Trump into a corner where both paths, escalation and de-escalation, damage him politically. And Trump, more than any modern president, makes decisions based on what plays well politically. That's the nightmare scenario. Not that Trump is bluffing, that he's not. 72 hours. That's how long it took for the most comprehensive diplomatic offer in 47 years to collapse into threats of total destruction. Iran's rejection wasn't irrational, it was calculated. Tehran assessed that accepting Trump's framework, even with sanctions relief and normalization, would require abandoning everything Iran has built its regional strategy on for 2 decades: support for Hezbollah, the primary deterrent against Israel, support for Palestinian resistance, the ideological core of the Islamic Republic's identity, ballistic missiles, the asymmetric capability that compensates for Air Force inferiority. From Iran's perspective, Trump's offer wasn't generous. It was surrender dressed as diplomacy. And Iran decided that enduring continued pressure, even military strikes, is preferable to accepting terms that hollow out the regime's reason for existence. Trump, for his part, made an offer he knew had a high probability of rejection, because it allows him to claim he tried diplomacy before resorting to force. The 72-hour sequence gives political cover. I offered them everything. They said no. Now we do it my way. But here's what neither side fully calculated. Iran assumed Trump's threats are bluffs designed for domestic political consumption, that he won't actually execute large-scale strikes because the costs are too high. Trump assumed that the threat itself, if credible enough, would force Iran back to negotiations. Both assumptions require the other side to blink, and right now neither side is blinking. By April 4th, U.S. carrier strike groups in the region had gone to heightened alert status. B-2 stealth bombers deployed to Diego Garcia, tanker aircraft staged at Gulf bases. Every indicator suggested operational preparation for major strikes. Iranian forces responded in kind. Mobile missile batteries dispersed to concealed positions. Fast attack craft deployed to Strait of Hormuz choke points. Proxy forces in Iraq and Syria went to elevated readiness. Both sides are now positioned for a conflict neither claims to want, but both are preparing to fight. And the 48-hour deadline Trump publicly announced is ticking down. The offer that was supposed to end 47 years of hostility instead pushed the U.S. and Iran closer to war than any point since 1988. March 31st to April 3rd will not be remembered as a diplomatic effort that failed. It will be remembered as the moment when the maximum pressure strategy reached its logical conclusion. Either Iran surrenders completely, or the pressure becomes military, and Iran chose not to surrender. Trump's threat to blow up the whole country is not rhetoric. Option 3, the 2,400 target strategic dismantlement plan, is real. It's being refined right now, and the only question is whether Trump's political need to appear strong outweighs the catastrophic consequences of actually following through. What happens in the next 48 hours matters more than any moment in U.S.-Iran relations since 1979. Can Trump walk back the threat without looking weak? Can Iran signal willingness to re-engage without appearing to capitulate? Or are we watching the final hours before a conflict that reshapes the Middle East, crashes the global economy, and kills hundreds of thousands? Share your perspective below. Is Trump bluffing, or is this actually happening? Can either side back down at this point without losing too much politically? Your engagement pushes this analysis to people who need to understand what's actually at stake here. This is war conflict. We cover what matters, and there's never been a moment that mattered more.